who sent over this handbook. It looks like a teacher's guide from South Korea.
Yeah, AHOVC 1123.pdf. It's quite practical.
Exactly. So think of this as our way of helping you get the key takeaways without getting, bogged down in reading the whole thing.
Right. The aim is to pull out the core ideas, the actionable stuff. This guide gives a pretty grounded look at what teachers are dealing with, especially in South Korea today.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to understand the nuts and bolts of classroom management there. What are the real challenges? What actually works?
Especially with everything changing so fast. Technology, students, even parents.
Okay, let's jump in. What's one of the first big ideas that jumps out from this handbook?
Well, one thing that immediately caught my eye was this phrase, teachers shouldn't be busy.
Huh. That sounds counterintuitive.
Right, but I think the point is about being effectively busy, not just running around putting out fires. It's just setting up systems, being proactive, so you can focus on the students, not just admin.
Okay, that makes sense. Being efficient to free up time for actual teaching and connecting.
Exactly. Which ties into the next bit, which is all about understanding today's students.
Ah, yes, the changing landscape. What does the handbook say they're like?
Well, several things. They're described as naturally networked, digital natives.
Okay, that tracks.
And they demand, content.
Kuljam, honey jam, meaning...
Basically, super engaging, highly entertaining content, think viral videos, that kind of energy.
Wow. Okay, so that's a high bar for keeping their attention in class.
Definitely. The handbook also says they value themselves highly. They have a strong sense of self-worth.
And they're vocal.
Very, I say what I need to say. They're assertive.
Okay.
And they really don't like...
That conde behavior, like being talked down to or lectured by someone older just because they're older?
Precisely. They have high moral standards, apparently, and they won't just follow orders blindly. You need to persuade them, negotiate.
So it's less command and control, more collaboration.
Yeah, you have to explain the why, offer choices, get their buy-in. It's a different dynamic.
Interesting. What else?
They embrace coolness, acknowledge strengths in others. There's a note about a potential to feel like outsiders sometimes. But fundamentally, they grow with trust and patience.
That feels important. Building that trust, giving them time.
Definitely. And it's not just the students who've changed. The handbook talks about parents, too.
Right. What's the picture there?
Generally, a more democratic approach in parenting styles. Also, more awareness of parental mental health issues, which is good.
It is good.
But then there's also mention of the rise of monster parents.
Oof. I think we can guess what that means. Maybe overly involved, demanding?
Probably something along those lines, yeah. Adds another layer of complexity for teachers trying to communicate and collaborate.
So you put all this together, the changing students, the evolving parent dynamics, and the role of the homeroom teacher, the Torah. Sounds incredibly demanding.
Oh, absolutely. The handbook really stresses the emotional and physical toll. Feeling overwhelmed, dealing with unpredictable stuff that, teacher training didn't really cover.
Yeah, the day-to-day reality must be intense.
It mentions the constant vigilance needed. Students come in with so many different things going on, their mood, what happened at home, you name it.
And the homeroom teacher is right there on the front line, more than subject teachers, right?
Much more contact, yeah. They're guiding the students' whole school life, essentially.
Which is why the handbook pushes for that proactive planning, setting up a framework for management rather than just constantly reacting.
Right. And a big part of that seems to be understanding and being ready to address student mental health.
What kind of issues does it mention?
Things like depression, gaming addiction, self-harm, ADHD, even defiance disorder. It's a lot.
It really highlights how much more the role involves now beyond just academics.
Totally. It's guidance, counseling, observation, a whole package.
Okay, so given that complex picture, what are some of the core mindsets the handbook suggests teachers adopt? We mentioned teachers shouldn't be busy.
Yeah, the efficiency mindset. Another big one is lowering expectations.
Tell me more about that. That sounds potentially problematic.
Well, it needs context. It's not about lowering academic standards. It's about recognizing that things you might expect students to know or do, like basic routines, maybe certain social norms, might not be there for everyone.
Because of different family backgrounds or situations.
Exactly. Diverse values, different levels of structure at home. So instead of getting frustrated that they don't do something, the idea is to shift focus.
Shift focus too.
To actively praising and rewarding the positive behaviors when you do see them, even small things like being on time consistently.
I see. Reinforce the good rather than just correcting the bad.
Right. And they even mention using the official student record system, the NIOUESA, to formally note positive things like punctuality. It validates the effort.
That's a practical way to do it. What else?
Becoming a master of observation, really paying attention to the classroom dynamics, student interactions, potential friction points.
Tuning in, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Catching things early.
Yeah. And related to the earlier point about assertive students, the handbook advocates for continuous persuasion over command.
Explaining the benefits, offering choices again.
Yes, like explaining the natural consequences of certain actions and letting the student choose their path rather than just laying down the law, fostering responsibility.
Okay, that feels like a theme emerging.
It is. Another mindset mentioned is valuing connections, or yin and yang.
Like relationships.
Yeah, but with a long-term view. Recognizing the lasting impact of the teacher-student relationship. How former students might even become mentors or resources later on.
That's looking really far ahead. Networking with alumni.
Kind of, yeah. Introducing them to current students, building that longer community.
Interesting.
And then there's patience and belief in growth. This connects back to students developing at different paces. The handbook uses this analogy, uuksum, like bamboo shoots. They might seem dormant for ages, then suddenly spurt up.
So you can't always see the progress immediately, but you have to trust it's happening.
Exactly. Don't give up too soon. Believe in that potential for sudden growth.
The hopeful perspective.
And finally, there's this idea, Yan, every student is a tool for my teaching.
Okay, tool sounds a bit impersonal.
Maybe instrument or part of the journey is better. The idea is that all students, even the really challenging ones, are integral to the teacher's own professional development and learning.
Okay. So seeing challenges not as roadblocks, but as opportunities to grow as a teacher.
Precisely. It reframes the whole experience.
These mindsets seem foundational. How do they translate into practical strategies? What does the handbook suggest doing day to day?
Well, first up is establishing clear classroom rules, but crucially involving the students in creating them.
Right, that buy-in factor again.
Suggestions include things like brainstorming sessions, maybe using sticky notes, group discussions, negotiating the rules and consequences together.
Makes sense, gives them ownership.
Yeah. Then there's implementing systems for student contribution, like a voluntary duty system, or song, or assigning one YOT, one role per person.
Like classroom jobs.
Kind of, yeah. But the emphasis is on making it voluntary where possible, having clear descriptions, providing the supplies needed.
Setting them up for success in that role.
Exactly, and not forcing kids who aren't ready or willing.
Okay, what else?
Operating a student council within the classroom, this week. Giving students real decision-making power.
Even online.
Yeah, they suggest fun online activities for it, like Zoom guessing games, things like that.
Creative.
Then there's using morning and end-of-day meetings on Ella, effectively.
Not just for announcements.
No, for connection. They suggest theme-based morning meetings, maybe online check-ins, using comments, sharing handwritten notes digitally, using infographics for news, making it engaging.
Using that routine time for community building.
Right. And of course, classroom events, REO.
Like parties or trips.
Yeah, and the handbook apparently goes into detail, like planning an overnight school camp. Student input, committees, safety checks, the whole process.
Shows how much planning goes into those fun activities.
Absolutely, it's all part of building unity. Another idea is creating a class yearbook. Hurry.
Oh, nice. Capturing memories.
Yeah, could be digital too. Suggestions like sections on my greatest strength or messages to friends.
That fosters reflection and connection.
Mm-hmm. And finally, using those official documents, student records, and letters of recommendation strategically.
How so?
Not just as paperwork, but as tools to genuinely recognize positive behavior and actively support students' future paths. The handbook includes examples of positive entries.
So framing those records is part of the supportive toolkit.
Exactly.
This leads nicely into something you mentioned earlier, the power of communication, especially praise. The handbook seems big on this.
Very big. It calls praise essential for relationships, recognition, even for establishing positive teacher authority.
And it connects back to lowering expectations, right? You have to look for things to praise.
It says you need to lower the bar sometimes to find those praiseworthy actions, especially the small, everyday things.
Like what?
Like acknowledging a student who gives a good greeting consistently, things that seem obvious but reinforce positive habits.
And the praise needs to be genuine.
Focused and sincere, yes. So students feel truly seen and appreciated.
How else can teachers deliver praise?
The handbook suggests using praise messages, sending texts or messages to students and parents about specific positive things observed.
Direct communication reinforces the behavior and connects with home.
Exactly. And then there's a more tangible system, a praise sticker system.
Ah, stickers. Classic.
Yeah, students collect stickers for positive actions. Examples given include helping others, good participation, completing tasks, and maybe the class earns a reward, like an ice cream party, when they reach a goal.
Makes it visual and collective.
Right. And for online learning, there's an idea called Jane Completion Awards.
Rewarding online engagement.
Yeah, tracking things like consistent participation, completing modules, maybe using start points, and giving recognition for that effort.
So lots of focus on the positive reinforcement loop. But what about when things go wrong? Classrooms aren't always harmonious.
True. The handbook addresses navigating challenges. For instance, dealing with a generally negative classroom atmosphere.
What's the advice there? Jump in immediately.
Actually, no. It advises recognizing triggers like maybe after a tiring school trip, but waiting for a clear collective misbehavior before addressing the whole class.
Why wait?
To avoid overreacting to minor individual things, they use this analogy of a gauge. Let it build slightly, see if it's a real group issue before intervening. Ah, okay. A more measured response. What about specific issues, like students lying?
There's a step-by-step approach suggested. First,